this is our one of our technical sessions. We have Willow, who is a digital twin provider. They're probably first to market with their platform. It's very advanced. They've gotten great traction with some major clients like Brookfield, Oxford, and the Durst organization. Ian Siegel is with us. Ian is out of New York. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. Good morning, everyone.
Okay. And Ian is how long have you been with Willow?
Been with Willow for about 3 years now.
And Ian looks after basically strategy and technical challenges with delivering digital twins, working with clients, understanding their operational needs, procuring models, developing models, setting up and connecting IoT strategies. So he's got a really interesting presentation for us today. And I think Willow is probably one of the market leaders here. They've gotten really great traction in the market. They've connected really well with Microsoft. If you're paying attention to Microsoft's marketing campaigns, etc. And Ian is a lot like people that are who participate in this community. Ian spent a lot of time in the field. He worked on a 70-story high-rise office tower in Manhattan, which I'm sure was a very complex project, utilizing BIM and driving those initiatives earlier in his career. So he's got a lot of common experience that I'm sure he draws upon with his new career path with Willow. I think that probably covers it. So I'm going to turn it over to Ian, and thank you very much for participating. And please ask questions. I'll be monitoring the Q&A. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tom. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be presenting to you all here with CanBIM. Hope everybody's keeping healthy and safe during these unusual times. It's unfortunate that we all couldn't be in the same room together. I know I love presenting at these kinds of conferences because of the just kind of conversation that emerges sometimes in the middle of the presentation, which I'd like to mention. I'm happy for anybody, if there are questions as we go. I'd like to keep this as casual and conversational as we can. I've got a lot of content to cover, but I feel like if you're able to take a couple key bits away about digital twins and kind of the future of the built environment in our building industry, I want you to be able to ask questions as we go. So Tom, thanks again for that awesome intro. I have started sharing my screen. I'm hoping everybody's able to see the cover slide here. Can someone confirm that for me? All right, Tom or Sergey, are you guys able to confirm that the screen share is working?
Microphone back on. Yeah, we can see it. Everything's good.
I heard a little bit of static. Tom or Sergey, are you guys able to see the screen?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much. All right, guys. With that said, let's jump right into it. We're going to cover quite a bit of ground today, of course, around the conversation of digital twins. There's been quite a bit of buzz in the market, not just in the building industry, but just in the world in general about digital twins. It's a big buzzword. There's a lot of hype about it. Gartner and the other major analysts have been predicting that digital twins are going to be a game changer, especially in what they're now calling the fourth industrial revolution, or just kind of the connection of physical things in the physical environment to the digital world. And things like internet and IoT are enabling those types of the excitement around digital twins. Of course, Microsoft and the other major technology companies have also made big bets on digital twins and are improving and getting their software and hardware solutions in line and ready to take advantage of this digital twin wave that's approaching us all. CanBIM, of course, is doing a conference specifically around the topic of digital twins, and like I said, I'm pleased to be presenting today. We're going to cover a couple of things. Of course, we'll cover just the question of what is a digital twin. And then from there, we're going to look at the building industry and what digital twins mean for the built environment, specifically who in the building industry participates in the process of creating a digital twin, who uses a digital twin, who tends to benefit from the use of a digital twin. And then, of course, we're going to jump into more specifically, what are the components of a digital twin? How do we develop one or assemble one? And I'll be drawing on One Manhattan West, which is another 1.1 million square foot high-rise tower in Manhattan that I'm overseeing delivery of. It's a Brookfield property that just finished construction a few months ago, and the first tenants are just moving into the building now. So we're going to use that as a kind of example that we draw on kind of throughout the presentation, and I'll tell some stories as we go about how we've delivered a digital twin and are in the current process of delivering that Brookfield digital twin as an ongoing sort of case study that we'll draw from. As Tom mentioned, my background is actually in the building industry as well. I know digital twin sounds like a very tech-focused topic. I've always been in some sort of BIM or technology capacity in the building industry. So I really started my career at KPF Architects in New York City, who was the architect behind several buildings in the master plan of Hudson Yards. They've also done lots and lots of buildings around New York, in cities like London, a lot of Asian cities. We've done work there. And my role at KPF was to oversee BIM implementation for most of the projects out of the New York office. So that was where I kind of started to learn about things like structured information and 3D modeling, and how all of just structuring information in the right way can benefit a design team that's producing a set of documents as they're designing a building. But of course, how they interface with the construction team and how contractors build up their own complex data sets that benefit them. But what really fascinated me the most was looking at the building industry as a whole, the kind of segments that exist between the design and engineering consultants, the construction team, and then the owners that ultimately inherit the building and all of the information about it and need to maintain and operate that building for the life cycle. So what really fascinated me was the idea of each of these different parties is structuring their own information and 3D model data, but who's really leveraging it, and how can we kind of unify the industry in a way that everyone's able to benefit in their own way. So a lot of that thinking started off at KPF. Once I left KPF, I joined a company based in Australia called Ridley, who was a digital design and construction company. So they offered digital services mostly to owners and operators of real estate and infrastructure to help those owners advise their design and construction teams on how they should be leveraging technology, how they should be setting up their BIM, and executing and handing over all this data in a way that ultimately begins with the end in mind and benefits the operations of the facility. Ridley we actually became Willow once we started developing our own technology product. This is a digital twin software solution that's cloud hosted. So once we started to develop our own technology in-house, that was when we started to gain a lot of traction with some major real estate portfolio owners, such as Oxford Properties, based in Toronto and has plenty of properties throughout Canada and around the world. Brookfield, who's also a global real estate organization, and the Durst organization, who's primarily in New York City, but expanding into other cities in the Northeast US. Willow as a company, we're doing digital twin delivery for some major blue chip Fortune 500 companies as well. Microsoft is a major technology partner in the solution that we build. And we are actually in the process of working with Microsoft on their campus redevelopment in Redmond, Washington, where they're headquartered. So we're advising the design and construction teams how they should be setting up their information management and BIM standards so that Microsoft is able to leverage a digital twin solution like Willow once the campus modernization is complete. Doing something very similar in Los Angeles on the new SoFi Stadium, home to the LA Rams. We're also working in the infrastructure sector, in particular with Pittsburgh International Airport, who's also in the middle of a $1.1 billion modernization effort. So jumping into the meat of the topic, what is a digital twin? Depending on who you talk to, especially what sector or what industry we're using as context, a digital twin is going to mean something different. It means one thing in aerospace, in automotive and vehicle manufacturing. There's another digital twin use, same thing as consumer electronics or consumer goods, manufacturing, health. All of these different industries have their own flavor of a digital twin that helps the people in that industry achieve their ends. Ultimately, the way that we define a digital twin, and this is geared a little bit toward the building industry because that's where we operate. But a digital twin is a precise and a virtual replica of a physical thing. And what this thing does, it's not just a 3D or a representation of a physical thing in the digital world, but what really makes a digital twin is the ability to collect and organize data, usually from a variety of different sources, to help the person that's interacting with or looking at the digital twin either make better decisions, automate certain aspects of their work, maybe enhance the experience of using that physical thing. So to translate this into the building industry, the digital twin for the built environment generally has a couple of different key data sources or types of data. The first of those is spatial data. Of course, this is a conference that was rooted in BIM. So of course, I imagine most, if not all of the people that are on the conference today understand spatial data. That's 3D models or 2D floor plans, ways of representing the spaces within a building or a piece of infrastructure. So that's certainly one component of a digital twin of a building or infrastructure asset. The next one down is asset data. This is information that's typically handed over from the construction team to operations. And it's basically all the materials and all the information about the systems, devices, equipment, and components of the building, usually that the operations team who's responsible for maintaining and operating the building, it's all the information that they would want to have on hand. So these are things like the manufacturer's O&M manuals. It might be an asset register, which is a list of all of the equipment with data like manufacturers, model numbers, serial numbers, warranty expirations, things of that nature. This is information that doesn't change too frequently or too regularly. Maybe as equipment is maintained or replaced, it'll change. But for the most part, it's reference material about the equipment or devices in a building. Now, the third one is live data. So there are all these different systems in a contemporary building that are capable of telling you real-time information about how the building is performing. A lot of times the sources of that live data are things like the building management or building automation system, the BMS or BAS. That tells you things like which pieces of equipment are on and off. Is the building in a heating or cooling mode? Are fans spinning? If so, how fast? Are pumps running? Things like that. IoT sensors as well report data back to the BMS a lot of times. But the BMS is just one of those systems in a building that can report live data. You also have things like elevator control systems that know exactly where each cab is within the shaft. You've got lighting control systems, utility metering systems that are monitoring how much electricity or gas is being used over the course of a month. So all of these different systems exist in these buildings, but a lot of times they're not necessarily unified in a single interface that's geared toward specific individuals who are responsible for operating the building. So that's a pretty important stream of information for a digital twin, especially for operations of a building. And there are all kinds of other sources too. For example, occupant data that might be collected through things like physical access control systems, environmental data, things like weather patterns that are collected from nearby weather stations about temperature outside the building and precipitation, things of that nature. Now, since we're focusing primarily on the building industry today and the digital twin for the built environment, I'm also going to focus primarily on digital twins that are generated during new construction. Of course, we're doing digital twins for existing assets, and those usually start with a connection to the live data and taking inventory of the spatial and the asset data that already exists for those buildings. But the three main streams of information that we're going to focus on, if we're assembling a digital twin alongside the design and the construction team, the three key streams of information that we're going to look at are the spatial, asset, and live data. Now, I should also mention, this is just a quick PSA, I guess. I'm going to show you images of the Willow digital twin platform, software that we've developed and we're deploying across a lot of our customers. But I should make it clear that we are not the only solution out there. And a lot of what we deliver to our customers, there are plenty of other solutions out there that are very beneficial to different aspects of the design, construction, operations, handover supply chain and building life cycle. So I'm throwing a couple of those up there. These are other solutions that that sometimes market themselves as digital twins, or some of these solutions play a role in a broader digital twin solution. So just want to make it clear, Willow is not the only, we're not the only game in town. I don't want you to feel like you're sitting through a Willow commercial for the next couple of minutes here while I start the product that we've built. Just want to make it clear that there are other solutions out there that certainly do certain aspects that could contribute to a digital twin solution for the built environment as well. Now, the aspect of Willow's solution that makes us unique, though, is once all of these different streams of information are under the same roof, they're on the same platform in Willow Twin, what we aim to do is we aim to take all of that data, we normalize it, or we structure it in such a way that using APIs, we can invite other solutions, other third-party technology solutions to operate off of that data. And that third-party ecosystem tends to fall into two different categories. There's usually a category of providers that are geared towards the performance of a building or the performance of an asset. These might be things like fault detection and diagnostic solutions. So that's basically, for those who aren't familiar with FDD, fault detection and diagnostics is it's a type of solution that looks at the live data, usually from the BMS, and it analyzes it. So it looks at historical data trends that come directly from the building, looking at how quickly fans are running, thermostat set points, and real-time sensor information, and it analyzes it. It runs math and algorithms on the historical data, and it generates insights for the building's operations team to optimize the way that they're running the facility. So that's a way basically of looking at the overall operations. If you think about any one of our customers, any of the owners of a building or an infrastructure asset, the way that they make money is they need to bring revenue in and they need to keep expenses as low as possible. A fault detection diagnostic solution is a great example of being able to run an algorithm and reduce your operating expenses. Maybe you use less electricity or fewer resources as a way of delivering comfort to the tenants in your building. And there are a handful of other different third-party solutions that we're able to integrate to as well. There are some really great solutions out there, things like Iconics, Coppertree, Switch Automation, KGS Buildings. These are all fault detection engines that Willow's attitude is let the experts, the best in breed solutions in the industry, let them continue to do what they do best, but make it extremely easy for a building owner who has a digital twin to allow those solutions to connect directly up to their data source. In the same way, a trend that we're now seeing, and especially post-COVID-19, I think where we're going to see is the ability to, for building owners to allow their tenants to have a premier experience. And in particular, that means using things like a tenant engagement or a tenant experience app on your phone. Today, a lot of landlords are using that as a way of being able to send push notifications in case there is an event or an emergency that they need to notify all the building users about. But through the use of a digital twin, we enable things like the phone to be your access card to the building so that you don't need to take out a physical key card and tap it against the turnstile and potentially touch something that could be dangerous to your health. So the ability to grant this type of premier heightened tenant experience and just make it easier for individuals to use the building, as well as have access to real-time information about how many people might be on the floor that I'm about to occupy, so I can maintain a safe distance while I'm there. If it's especially crowded today, maybe I'm not interested in working on that particular floor on this day at this time. So the unique thing about Willow is once all of this digital twin data is aggregated, we invite third-party marketplace ecosystem vendors to be able to connect to the digital twin so that they're able to deliver their value to owners of buildings and infrastructure. Now, I'm going to hop into a live demo in just a second. Most of the stories I'm going to tell today are because Willow is not just a software provider. We do have a team that we call Willow Digital that provides services to owners and operators of buildings and infrastructure. So we come in alongside design teams and alongside construction teams. Ideally, we enter the process as early as possible so that we can help owners set the requirements and set the standards so that it can be included in the design and construction contracts, so that the owner knows the data that they're collecting directly from the supply chain is going to benefit the operations of the building as well. And of course, with a background like myself, coming from architecture, a lot of the rest of the Willow digital team as well comes from either design or construction in a BIM or a VDC capacity. So we make sure that whatever processes or whatever changes we're proposing off of what is typical design or construction scope is still in line with familiar industry standard BIM workflows. So with that said, the reason that we're playing in this space at all is we recognize how siloed the building industry is, especially because design and construction teams build up their own data sets and their own 3D models, and those different data sets are usually designed to benefit whoever is working in that stage, right? The AE team designs their BIM ecosystem to benefit things like design coordination and production of drawings, maybe 3D visualization as well. The construction team does it to manage their construction risk, running things like clash detection on a regular basis. And operations, of course, has their own set of data, but these three streams are very, very different. And ultimately, when you hand over information from one silo to the next, information is either lost in the shuffle, or it's just not structured in a way where it does take a little bit of time to catch up to the level of efficiency that data was performing at prior to the handover. That doesn't just happen from construction into operations. The same problem happens if an operator changes once the building is open. So if there's a managed service provider, maybe Cushman & Wakefield or JLL takes over operations, there's an onboarding process and time is lost because there's a handover of information from the previous operator. So what Willow aims to do in the way that we've designed our software as well as our services is to get away from the world of handover of paper documents, 3-ring binders, even CD-ROMs and thumb drives, and structure this data that comes from the design and the construction teams at the moment that this information about the equipment, the systems, and the devices are created. Start to structure it in a way that on day one of operations, it's already structured in a way that the building owner is able to leverage the digital twin of their building. And I'll show a little bit more on that in just a minute here. I'm going to hop into a live demo so you can see exactly what it is that I mean. So what I'm now showing, I'm showing a view of our platform. We're running just in a web browser right now. And you can see here, we're looking at an interactive map of North America. Now, if I scroll down this list on the left-hand side, we're seeing right now all of the Willow digital twins that I as a user have access to. You can see I have different search tags as well. So I'm able to filter by location. Maybe we zoom into the country of Australia, where we're headquartered. Maybe we even zoom into the city of Melbourne. So what I'm now seeing here, oh, I guess I was already in Melbourne, fantastic, cool. So as we start to zoom in a little bit, we're seeing 3D city context. We're seeing a 3D map of the city of Melbourne. And any of these buildings in purple are buildings that I as a user have access to a digital twin of. So we're going to focus in today in particular on this particular digital twin. This is 567 Collins Street. This is a commercial office building in Melbourne, Australia. So as soon as we zoom into the building scale digital twin, we're now seeing the 3D model that was produced by the architect and the structural engineer of this particular building. So some of you might be familiar with this kind of a 3D model interface as part of the design and construction BIM workflow, but you'll notice I'm in a web browser right now. I'm not running a heavy desktop software like Revit or Navisworks to be able to view this. This is all running in the cloud, and we can look at this in a web browser. So what we're able to do here, we've organized our interface so that we're able to navigate the spatial data by level. And all of these different views are configurable. So we can pick and choose maybe for a stadium, for example, in the case of the SoFi Stadium that the Willow team is working on right now. It doesn't make sense for us to organize such a large, wide building organized by floor. So instead, we're organizing it zone by zone because each different zone has its own system or set of systems that serve the building with its own equipment and infrastructure. So I've now clicked on level 4. We're now looking at a horizontal cross-section slice through level 4. We're able to turn on additional model layers as well. So we could go in and turn on, say, the mechanical system. And what we'll now see is the 3D model, not that was produced by the design engineer, but by the mechanical trade contractor that produced this 3D model for BIM coordination and is responsible for purchasing and installing all of this equipment. A lot of times these 3D models are even updated throughout the construction process in order to hand over an as-built model at the end of construction. But the idea is that this model is evolving as construction takes place. So it's not at the very end of construction when these 3D models are turned over that the owner is able to benefit from it and start to use it. Now, what you might have also noticed is down on the left-hand corner, we're now looking at a list of over 1,000 assets or pieces of equipment or devices in the building just on level 4 here. So we're seeing things like light fixtures, cable trays, we're seeing valves, VFDs, VAV boxes. This is, of course, a very long list that's pretty cumbersome to navigate just by scrolling through. So we've built the ability to go ahead and search for pieces of equipment that you're looking for. So maybe we're interested in looking for a VAV box as an example. So when we click on VAV, I've just typed VAV into the search box and hit enter. We're now looking at a list of just the 34 VAV boxes that exist on this floor. And here you can see up this gray text here is showing the unique tag numbers of each different VAV box. So if an operator knows, all right, I'm interested in looking at the VAV in the west portion of the building, W3 for instance, they're able to click on that piece of equipment and they're taken straight to that piece of equipment in the 3D model. You could see here, thinking back to the 3 key streams of information we were talking about before. You've got your spatial data that's up in the model viewer. Now we're starting to look at asset data. So this is information that the owner has determined they want to have on hand during operations. So we're seeing information like the manufacturer and the model number of this VAV box. We're seeing the date that the contractor installed it on site, the warranty start and end date for this particular piece of equipment, as well as some pretty specific engineering information. So we're seeing things like the electrical current, voltage, and frequency. We're seeing the electrical panel that's serving power to this piece of equipment, as well as the switchboard that controls it. We're even able to go in and, as part of the submittal process, we're able to attach any approved submittals or upload the original manufacturer's O&M manual. So here we're seeing any information that we didn't have in that front view. The operator is able to go in and look at the very technical data that's important if there's a decision about do we need to replace this piece of equipment, or what do I need to have on hand while I'm maintaining it, for example. So we've talked about the first 2 streams of information. The third stream of information is live data. So this building is active, it's live right now and operating. We're looking right now at real-time information that comes from the BMS. So we're seeing things like the position of the damper inside this VAV box. We're seeing things like the speed of the fan. We're seeing information about the thermostats that serve this space and ultimately control whether this fan or the VAV is operating in a cooling mode. And we're trending all of that data over time. So like I mentioned, this building is in Australia, where it's right now 11:36 p.m. In the evening. So we're seeing, I guess, maybe it was getting a little bit warm, so the VAV kicked in to cool the space down and keep it reasonably at a reasonable temperature in its overnight state. Now, what I should also mention, I'm going to hop into the side of the platform that we use as a way of collecting all of this data while the building is being designed and constructed. What we're showing here, this is just a dashboard that shows the level of completion of the information in the digital twin. So we're able to change this pie chart so we're only looking at one discipline over another. Maybe we want to keep, we want to see in particular how the mechanical contractor is doing. Or maybe you want to drill into other different trades. But what that pie chart is ultimately measuring is the level of completion of all of the data So what we're seeing here, this is the part of our platform, and I mentioned before there are other handover solutions that are similar to this aspect of the Willow platform. But what we're seeing here is a list of all the different VAV boxes in the building. Some of these VAVs have, some of these devices have a validation error associated. We'll talk about that in a second. But if we go to the pencil icon to edit this data, this is a web form where the mechanical contractor can come in as they learn information about the VAV boxes that they're going to be installing. So for example, as submittals are approved, they're able to come into this view, provide the information they know, upload any supporting documentation, and it becomes live in the digital twin that we were just looking at before. Now we're also able to set up validation rules. So some of these red triangles that we saw before are VAV boxes that have validation errors. That means it's possible that the tag that was entered there is the same as another VAV box within the building. So that's an issue that we're able to raise. Or maybe there's critical information that hasn't been provided. That would flag a validation error as well. So the key purpose here, especially if this tool is being used during construction as a way of validating that all of the required information is handed over from construction into operations, this de-risks that process. The contractor is now very clear on what information still needs to be provided. The owner is very clear on what information do they or don't they have in their court. This is a really good way of being able to track all of the information so that by the time the contractor leaves the project, they're confident that this was, they did provide everything that they needed to, and there's not a risk of the owner approaching them in the future because they didn't provide enough information. Now, of course, the exciting thing about all this is it doesn't need to happen at the scale of one building, one floor, one device at a time. We're going to talk about Brookfield and Manhattan West in just a minute here, but one of the reasons that portfolio owners like Brookfield, who of course own many more than one building, the reason that they're most excited is that all of this data, the live data, the static asset data, the spatial data, it's all aggregated and normalized in a way that allows them to roll these metrics up across not just the scale of one building and being able to measure overall performance for that asset, or maybe the number of critical alerts that need somebody's attention, but being able to roll that up across an entire region of buildings and see those same statistics averaged over multiple assets. And then of course, rolling it out across an entire portfolio. The ability to start at the scale of one device and go all the way up to an entire portfolio. This is a view that the major decision makers, the C-suite, the asset managers who don't need to know the nitty-gritty details about what's breaking down, but do need to know how well are my assets and my portfolio performing. This is the real advantage to digital twins, being able to scale this and report this in real time and serve just the right information to just the right people to make decisions about their business and about their portfolio. So to cover off who benefits from a digital twin, there's four key groups that we've highlighted. Of course, there's the design and construction teams. We talked a little bit already about how the contractor benefits from using a tool like this to hand information over to the owner, because they can be confident by the time they leave the job and their contractors, their trade subcontractors leave the job, there is not outstanding information that had somehow gotten lost in the shuffle. Of course, we're also de-risking the construction stage in general, just having a solution like this where each of the different stakeholder groups is contributing information and reviewing information. I'm not going to tell you which project it was on, but we recently were working on a project where the Willow team was looking for, we found a discrepancy between the design drawings. There was a damper that we found on the design drawings that was missing from the contractor shop drawings and missing from the asset register that we were just looking at. And so we raised it with the owner, we raised it with the contractor, and it turned out that this fire smoke damper had been missed. Mistakes happen on construction sites all the time. And the contractor did the right thing. Within a week, that fire smoke damper was installed. But of course, we think ahead to what if a fire had taken place at some point in the future in exactly the wrong place in that building? What might the consequences of that oversight have been? And did this digital twin data collection process actually help to make sure that that damper get put in, and maybe did we save some lives in the future? We like to think that maybe we did. We of course like to think that there won't be a fire in that building, of course, too. But just this level of oversight over the information, especially making sure that it's collected at the moment that that information is being created and equipment is being installed. That's the best way to kind of provide oversight and review of this data to de-risk the construction process in general. Of course, we talked a little bit about the building operators' benefits here. They should be able to spend a lot less time investigating issues with their building and more time supporting their customers, supporting the tenants that take spaces in the buildings. They can be preemptive about problems as well. So a digital twin solution might benefit an operator because if there's a tenant that takes a space on level 50 of any particular building, there might be anywhere from 10 to 30 to 50 different mechanical or electrical assets or pieces of equipment on a different floor of the building that are contributing to the comfort of the tenant on level 50. And that's over 1,500 live data points that are already being captured by the BMS that we're able to put into the same context with a digital twin, automatically alert the facilities team, hey, there's an issue with maybe it's this particular piece of equipment, and these are the tenants that might be affected, level 50 tenants in particular. So of course, the integration of all of the live systems, put it in context of the 3D models and the spatial data, is able to allow building operators to be preemptive. This enables things like predictive maintenance as opposed to scheduled maintenance or reactive maintenance. We talked briefly about asset management, just giving real-time visibility and insights into the performance, not just of a single building at a time, but the entire portfolio of assets to make sure that they're making decisions that are going to benefit the people that work in that building and benefit the company that owns the building, of course, which is their role. And then, of course, thinking about the people that use the building, the occupants, the users, being able to offer them a higher degree of control over their environment, allowing them a higher degree of confidence that they are safe in their building, knowing that they can connect with the people that work for and support the building in the case of an emergency. It's also increasingly important for tenants to be able to keep track of their own energy and access control information. So there are some really exciting opportunities in the tenant and the leasing space there as well. Now, we've talked a little bit over the course of the presentation, and I want to make sure that I save some time for questions. So I'm going to move through the how do we develop a digital twin process pretty quickly. But in the next 5 minutes, we'll just give a high-level overview of what are the steps to developing a digital twin. And again, we're going to focus primarily on the streams of information around things like 3D modeling and static asset information collection, as well as live data integrations as well. Now, of course, we'll do this in the context of the Brookfield 1 Manhattan West project. The building in particular, it's 210,000 square meters, which is 1.1 million square feet. For those of you who are using the Imperial system, it's a 67-story building. It opened at the end of last year, and some of their major tenants are actually moving into the building now. Some of the major tenants are companies like EY, Accenture. The NHL headquarters is moving here, as well as legal firms like Skadden and McCool Smith. Now, the very first thing that we do, this is speaking about how the Willow Digital Services team operates. If we're brought in to deliver a digital twin for a new customer, one of the first things that we do is we work directly with the owner, particularly the facilities management or the building operations team, to understand what are the types of equipment that maybe today you're already keeping track of in a system like a CMMS, which is a computerized maintenance management system. What are the key assets or the key pieces of equipment that your company has deemed critical to your building operations? If a chiller fails, you're going to have very uncomfortable tenants throughout the entire building. That's a pretty critical piece of equipment. It's one that we would want to make sure that the digital twin is aware of, and that's a type of equipment that we're going to feature in the digital twin. So we have a conversation like that, understanding what are the current standards in terms of critical equipment. Maybe they already have an asset management strategy. If they don't have an asset management strategy, we're quick to advise them on types of equipment that are typically featured in a digital twin. That's what you're actually seeing on the left-hand side here. So we produce a document that just lists the categories of equipment that we're going to feature, as well as devices, things like fire alarm devices, and wireless access points for internet, things of that nature. Now, what you're seeing on the right side is we agree with the owner on what are the specific attributes or the specific parameters about each of these different types of equipment that we recommend collecting. Now, in some cases, you're going to collect the same type of information for any piece of equipment, regardless of what it is. That might be things like manufacturer, model number, warranty, expiration date, things like that. But then for things like chillers, you might be interested in collecting information that's more specific to a chiller and wouldn't apply to something like a control panel for a piece of equipment. So we do get granular with the owners there about understanding what are you interested in tracking. And then we try to strike the right balance with what's acceptable in the industry. If you were to ask a contractor or ask a commissioning agent for this level of information, which individual or which group is best suited to provide it if we were going to require it of your supply chain? Because that's the ideal scenario, is that the owner doesn't need to spend time and money collecting this information from the information that's handed over at the end of construction. Ideally, this information all sits in a single place as the information becomes available, and that way the entire supply chain is able to refer to it where it's necessary. That location is ideally, if Willow is on the project, we do collect that information in the asset register that I showed during the live demo a few minutes ago. So from the documents that I just showed, once we agree on it with the owner, we configure the structure of the asset register. So we break it down by each of the different contractors, the different types of equipment that they're going to be responsible for providing information on. And then once you click on any particular piece of equipment, you're able to see across the top here the specific data that contractor is responsible for providing. Sometimes there's attributes that the contractor is best suited to provide. So things like manufacturer and model number, those come out of the submittal process. But maybe there's another stakeholder or another consultant on the project, like a commissioning agent, who's better suited to provide more granular engineering data about each of those pieces of equipment, because it would just be data entry work that's required of the contractor. That's one of the areas that the Willow Digital team usually advises owners as well, assigning responsibility for collecting and contributing these information, who's responsible for verifying it before it gets turned over at 100% completion. Now, once the contractors are working on the project, they've been signed up and it's in their scope to provide this level of information, we also make sure that there's an understanding about the 3D model requirements. So 3D coordination is commonplace on buildings of the scale and the complexity that we're used to delivering digital twins for. So a lot of times the contractor had already planned on doing a 3D coordination workflow. They already have written it into the trade contractors agreements that they need to produce to a certain LOD. A BIM execution plan is developed. One of the things that we require to be included in a digital twin delivery plan, if the contractor's 3D models are going to be included in the overall digital twin, we include a requirement that when you select a specific piece of equipment that is considered a digital twin asset, that in the Navisworks properties, you are able to see this is an exhaust fan, this is the category it belongs to, this is its asset ID or its equipment tag number, or in cases for high quantity, kind of low value items. So these are things like sprinkler heads, maybe they're things like light fixtures where it would be pretty cumbersome to uniquely tag every single piece of equipment. We would say, okay, we'll just give the type code. If this is a light fixture, maybe you give it type L1 because of its dimension and its use, and then type L2 is a different one. A lot of times the designers already classify fixtures in that way. So we recommend use what's in the construction documentation. But where there's any ambiguity, we put together a set of master naming conventions that the entire supply chain is able to use, refer to, and they could be confident that they're filling these 3 properties in the models out accurately and in a way that's going to link up properly to the 3D asset register. Because that's the real challenge here, is making sure that you're collecting all of the data about the building and the equipment in one place, but making sure that all of that data, which does not need to reside in the models, I'll come back to that in just a second, making sure that the 3D model elements link properly to the asset register data. So what we mean there is it's not a requirement that all of the asset register information that's going to be turned over exists in the Navisworks models. In fact, most owners don't have the Navisworks savvy to make use of those models during operations. And even if they did, a lot of times keeping that information up to date as the building is operated and maintained and equipment is replaced, keeping all that data up to date in Navisworks is extremely difficult. That's why we have this web-based asset register platform that's extremely easy for operators to update as maintenance and tasks take place that might update that information.
Ian, just want to interject
Yep.
here just quickly, just to remind you of the time. We are approaching the end of the hour. We do have a 30-minute buffer between these morning presentations, so we can go a little bit over, but I do want to make sure that we've got enough time for questions and discussion. So,
yeah, good. Yeah, thanks for the time check. Excellent. This is, I think, like my second to last slide or so. So we'll do Q&A in just a second here. We're not going to go into much detail about how to do integrations to live data because that's a very technical and very specialized field. Systems integrators typically do this kind of work. And to be completely honest, this is not my personal area of subject matter expertise. But the systems that we typically recommend connecting to are listed on the screen here. That's your BMS, utility metering, lighting, elevator, and physical access control. And a lot of those live data points are then just mapped to the asset register. So you might have 5 or 10 different real-time data points in the BMS that tie back to a specific piece of equipment. The way that this works is those 5 data points are tagged to the asset in the asset register. And that's how within a digital twin solution like Willow, when you are looking at a particular piece of equipment, you're also able to look at the real-time and historical IoT sensor data that's associated just with that piece of equipment. Of course, we also tag it by things like the level, what building it belongs to, what system it belongs to, and that's what allows higher level rolled up dashboards and KPIs and things like that. So of course, based on the information that we've covered so far, the traditional AEC players that are usually best placed to deliver digital twins, and this is based on our conversations with several different players in the market, they tend to be general contractors or commissioning engineers. Willow in particular is in touch with PCL construction and multiplex because they're interested in being able to be confident that they're collecting all the information that they need to hand over to the owners, but they recognize that owners might be interested in just connecting up to live data, and now they have a fully functional digital twin that's going to support their operations. So it's not a major additional lift on the general contractor. In fact, there's quite a bit of benefit there. But then they're also providing it in a manner that is could be extremely useful to the operator on day one through the use of a digital twin that they could customize for their operations. Commissioning engineers are very similar. We're in conversation with a commissioning engineer called McVeigh and Mangum, based in South Carolina here in the U.S., who is particularly interested in being able to hand over all of the commissioning data in a similar way to an owner that could very easily just connect up to their BMS and now have a real-time digital twin that can support their operations as well. So I'll kind of stop on this wrap-up slide. We talked about the 3 key streams of information that contribute to a digital twin. The best time to capture high-fidelity building data is definitely during design and construction, as that information is being created for the first time. And of course, digital twin assembly is a team effort. There are a lot of different sources that are coming in from a variety of different stakeholders. It definitely is a specialized kind of role to be able to orchestrate the collection and aggregation of all this information. But I think we're going to see quite a bit more of it in the building industry over the next couple of years, especially as owners become more and more interested in using digital twins for their portfolio for operations. So with that, I'll open it up to Q&A.
Awesome.
Hand it back over to you, Tom.
Yeah, that was really excellent. I loved how you covered sort of the basics of this whole concept, and then went pretty deep. And obviously, Willow looks like a pretty amazing product that is looks pretty advanced compared to other systems that I've seen. We have a handful of questions here from the audience that came through, and I would encourage anyone still listening here to put some questions up, and I'll publish them so everybody can see them. So the first question was from Ryan C. How have you found the learning curve from the construction side with the advanced software? So I guess working with the contractors and your product, I assume that Willow sort of like provides the platform, trains the project team, and they publish the data directly into it. So maybe you talked a little bit about that, but maybe elaborate.
Sure. Yeah, excellent question. There definitely is a learning curve, but the learning curve isn't nearly as steep as the 3D modeling platforms that the drafters are using currently for things like 3D coordination. One of the things that Willow is very careful about is we're not at a point right now where we are allowing a contractor to, or even an owner, to just purchase the platform without any Willow digital services accompanying it. So one of the key items that the Willow digital team, one of the roles that we perform on the project is, of course, we stand up the platform and we consult with the owner to make sure that the asset register, for example, is configured in a way that we're collecting the right data. But we stay on for the duration of the project. We train actually each of the different trade contractors individually. We have a kickoff meeting with the broader construction team and the general contractor to explain the digital twin initiative. We explain why is the owner interested in a digital twin, but most specifically, what is the information that the contractor producing? It's like their 3D models, the asset data that they'll be contributing to the asset register. Basically, how is that stuff that they're already used to producing, how is that going to live on beyond construction into operations? So we get everybody on the same page and excited about this digital twin, and we get them excited about participating in it. It kind of gives a new level of value to the 3D models that the drafters are producing, for example. But then what we also do is once we configure the platform for the project, we train each individual subcontractor one-on-one. We explain it in terms that make sense for their trade. So we don't use like a chiller as the example for the plumbing contractor. Like we'll talk about pumps and we'll talk about tanks. So we'll explain it, and we'll even suggest certain workflows that we've gained from our time in the industry working for contractors in a VDC capacity, and suggest BIM VDC workflows that could support the process. So we make sure that they're well equipped with everything that they need to be successful. I hope that answers the question about the learning.
Yeah, so I guess the challenge with that potentially is that a lot of the trades aren't, there's different levels of maturity with producing models, even just for coordination and fabrication and whatnot. So getting trades to input, I guess, assume like model content as well as data content. But so your system must have like a workflow management system where you can see what trades are responsible for populating what asset data for the registry, and then you can kind of manage a checklist to make sure that all that information ultimately flows into the system and hold those trades accountable. Yeah. Is it a mix where potentially maybe a GC assigns a coordinator and the coordinator has to chase all that data and make sure it ultimately gets into the system?
We've seen that example. Yeah, that's usually the most successful model, is that there is a coordinator who is responsible for overseeing the digital twin effort on the general contractor side. That's usually when things are most efficient. Would
that be like a full-time effort to collect the data and manage the models?
It's we've seen it. We recommend like a 30% effort, 30 to 40%. It's not a full-time effort because a lot of times the 3D models that are being produced are already at least mostly digital twin ready. And we don't put much extra burden on the general contractor to make sure that the data is structured properly. So we have a process where once the contractor has finished their 3D model, they submit it to Willow, we check it and make sure that it is or isn't compliant with the software. So the Willow team does review models, we approve them. Usually the first one or two submissions of 3D models, we identify the key issues that need to be corrected. But usually by the time we've looked at a model for the third time, like the very first floor, the first coordination zone, by the time we've done like one or two rounds of revisions, the contractor understands, okay, these are the buttons I need to press in AutoCAD to make sure I'm producing the model and the data properly, or this is what I need to populate in Revit, for example. So yeah, we make sure that we're not putting additional burden on the contractor to a point where they need to assemble a digital twin from scratch. We just give them the guidelines that are already in line with industry workflows.
Okay, so we're at the top of the hour, but maybe we'll do a lightning round here because there are a pile of questions just came in from the audience, which is great. We have 30-minute buffer period, so if we go maybe another 5-10 minutes, people can still have time to go grab a coffee. So Daniel G is asking, is the massing of the city in the example that you showed provided from a third party? Is that an integration from, say, Google Earth?
Yeah, in fact, I believe the integration is with Mapbox. I believe it's Mapbox. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, that's not Willow proprietary. It's a third-party integration. They do a really nice job at visualizing cities in 3D.
So we have the next question here. How do you identify the asset information required for digital twin during different stages? Let's say 2 cases, one right from the design stage and one for an existing building.
All right. Tom, I don't know if it's just for me, but it sounds like your audio cut out on my side. I'll go ahead and answer the question that I heard, which was how do we set the requirements at different stages of the project? And the short answer is the Willow team, we've designed the process based on our own experience in the industry around what information is typically created and readily available at each stage. So for example, the design team is already able to, by the time they hit usually 100% DD, they have a rough quantity of the equipment that's going to be part of the digital twin. Ideally, their models are constructed in a way that we could run, we could schedule them. So you should know approximately how many VAV boxes, if we're going to stick with that example, or how many fans are in the building. So it's helpful to know those quantities toward the end of design so that we know that the information we're receiving from the contractors are generally in line with that, and we can true up any difference between design and construction. The asset data about each piece of equipment or each asset at the time of design is usually limited to things like its location. So what level or zone of the building is it? What room, room name and room number is it in? As well as rough quantities. So a lot of times we start with locations and quantities in design. Then when we go into construction, there's kind of 2 more stages where more information trickles through. At the time that submittals are approved, you can provide information like manufacturers and model numbers. But of course, things like serial numbers or installation dates will not become available until the equipment is installed in the field. So that's another kind of data drop point, is once the equipment is installed, give us that nature of information. And then, of course, the remainder of the information comes through during the handover, commissioning, and closeout process. So we do stage the level of information that's required throughout the project to make sure we're asking the right questions of the right supply chain parties at the right time.
Mm-hmm. It requires a lot of upfront planning. So next question, can you provide, can Willow provide high security or government level military access for projects? One of the challenges we often have in Canada is that the servers aren't located in Canada. So where are your servers and what level of security do you have? And are you working with any, say, military or secret level clients right now? Or could you even answer that question? I don't know.
Yeah, I can answer that question to a degree. I know for a fact that, yes, I don't know the specific cybersecurity certifications that we are that we have. I believe we have an ISO and I think a SOC 2 certification in the works. But a lot of the cybersecurity and the information security for the Willow platform actually comes from the Microsoft Azure product stack. So Willow did not build our solution entirely from the ground up. Very little software is built entirely from scratch. A lot of times there will be a cloud solution or a software as a service solution will be built on a framework by Microsoft, by AWS, by the Google Cloud. So we specifically chose Microsoft because of their because of those cybersecurity, the features that they offer and the certification levels that they have. Willow and Microsoft are a partner in that way. It's not an exclusive partnership. We can still deliver Willow on a Google server if there is a need for that. But we prefer to use Microsoft for that exact reason. And Microsoft does have quite a bit more security clearance, especially with government bodies, than the Willow solution would be if we had built it entirely from scratch. Microsoft also allows us to work with that data sovereignty requirement. So we can make sure that all of the data resides in Canada if that's a requirement of the customer. I know we're working with clients in the US that say our data can't sit in Australia where we're headquartered, and Microsoft allows us to meet those data sovereignty requirements.
That was great. Thank you. So I'm just going to ask one more question, and I just want everyone in the audience to know that Ian is going to be available to answer questions and whatnot by email. So we're going to cut and paste all these leftover questions into an email for Ian to respond to. And your contact information is probably available. You can LinkedIn, or we can share that somewhere else so people can get a hold of Ian if they want to learn more. So just last question, with your particular system, is there a limit to the project size that your system can manage, or is there a feasibility? Like maybe give a range, like what's the smallest project maybe makes sense and the largest project that is practical to implement with your system?
Yeah, that's a good question. The short answer is no, there's not a limit to how big or complex a project can be. And that's one of the reasons that the Willow Digital Services team is involved. In the same way that when you're starting a new project in a BIM environment, you make decisions about, well, how do we divide things like work sets, or how do we break up our Revit model so that this makes the most sense for the team that's going to be working on it. We might make decisions about what's the best way to segment a building or a campus of buildings or a very complex, large facility so that it's ideal for the user that's going to be interacting with the digital twin. But from a technical perspective, no, there's not a limit to the size or the complexity that we can handle. To be totally candid, we're not working on very many small projects right now. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, Willow's strategy was to swing for the fences and try to work with the biggest, best customers in the world, rather than starting off on like single family residences, for example, and then try to build our way up. So that is in large part why we've been as successful as we are. We have a really great CEO, Joshua Ridley, who has really great contacts in his network and really truly believes that this is a way that we can transform the built environment. So while there technically is no project too small, there's certainly a financial aspect that where it just doesn't make financial sense for a company like Willow at our current stage of growth to take on. But that's not to say that we couldn't do a digital twin. I know I'm in the process of building the digital twin for my 2-bedroom condo in New Jersey. So it can be done.
So will you be working with like local consultants and training them up so you can scale up your product, or does Willow want to scale up the team to always be involved with every single project?
Yeah, one of the next stages of our growth, in fact, is a channel partnership model that allows delivery partners, whether they're contractors, commissioning engineers, systems integrators. We are interested in being able to get our software into buildings and infrastructure assets that the Willow Digital team doesn't necessarily implement by ourselves. So over the coming months, especially if you are working for a company that would be interested in being able to implement digital twin solutions for some of your customers, I'd be happy to have a conversation and put you in touch with the right people at Willow to make that happen.